everyone. Welcome to our Women in Tech panel today at HackCamp 2021 Network Day. We are so excited to have all these amazing panelists here with us today. If you have any questions for them, please drop them in the Women in Tech channel on Discord, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. For now, let's get to know these lovely panelists a little bit more. So I'll be introing them all today. So first up, we have Laura. Laura is a Security PM Program Manager at Microsoft after graduating with a degree in computer science. During her time in college, she led her university's Grace Hopper Scholarship Program, worked as a TA, and she has worked at a variety of different companies from startups to Microsoft as an intern as well. Now in her free time, Laura runs a YouTube channel centered around her life, CS, and career advice, and more. So welcome, Laura. So we also have Jennifer here today, and Jennifer is a self-taught UX designer with a background in psychology, marketing, and entrepreneurship. When she's not busy installing yet another Figma plugin, you can find her downtown at her favorite vegan restaurants. And we also have Anita here today, who is a software engineer at Amazon Web Services in Vancouver, BC. She graduated from UBC with a major in computer science and was previously involved in NW Plus during her time at school. So welcome back. And lastly, we have Sophia, who is the head of product at Legible, a Vancouver startup with a mission to empower and connect authors and readers through open access to a global reading and publishing ebook platform. Through her years of experience in instructional design, building and shaping user experiences, and working with customers and partners in the educational, technology, and book publishing space, she specializes in managing growing cross-functional teams to deliver well-documented products and services with usability in mind. She also holds a BSc in Interactive Arts and Technology and Communications from Simon Fraser University in BC and a Master's in Management from University of Illinois. So thank you all for being here once again. So yeah, let's get started right away with our panel. I see we have tons of questions in the Discord, so that's awesome. So I guess I'll be going through chronologically, and then we'll go from there. So if anyone just wants to speak at any time, feel free to just speak up, and we'll be more than happy to hear what you have to say. So the first question that we have is, was tech something you knew you wanted to do at a young age?
I can take this one first. Yeah, I feel like there's a misconception in tech, especially in design, where it's like you need to know all these programs and all the software to be able to like design properly or to like be a woman in tech. But to be honest, I kind of started out with pen and paper. Like when I was a kid, I didn't have like an iPhone or like a laptop or anything. So I just made my own with pen and paper, and then I would like draw websites on it and then like make this swipeable like iPhone thing and then make my own apps. And it was just through pen and paper. And then like, I don't know, my imagination was pretty wild. So I guess I kind of got into tech that way. But I just wanted to say like, it doesn't always have to be something to do with a computer. Like you don't have to feel like just because you don't know a software, that means you're not like good enough to be in tech. It's really like you can use whatever tools are available to you.
I can also chime in and say definitely not. I was probably one of those people that switched the idea of what they wanted to do tons of times, despite the fact that two people in my family are actually software engineers. So I kind of had that model in my family, and I still hated it. So definitely not what I expected. I bounced from being a doctor from wanting to be a doctor to wanting to be a lawyer to wanting to go into finance. And then finally, when I hit college, I was like, oh, shoot, I actually don't want to do any of those things. And just hoped and prayed that computer science would work out as a major for me. So thankfully it did. But definitely there are tons of people like me that get into it at the college level or much later in their lives and are still really successful. So no matter when you get into it, it's still going to be awesome. And you can really learn a lot in the field.
Yeah, and I can add to it as well. I was one of those kids who realized that their hobby might have been a possible career. So I was one of those kids who loved paint during computer class and would just mess around. And then starting high school, I was always that girl known to like create really cool club posters. And I never saw design. I started out in design as a career. I was good at like problem solving, so I thought engineering, something around there, was a possible choice for me in university. So chemical engineering, because I loved chemistry at the time. But then there was a lot of failures along the way, and I want to acknowledge that. Like, I failed physics 11, and so that engineering dream was lost. So then I thought, okay, I want something still related to like solving problems. So I chose computer science, and I started out first year computer science at SFU, and then I failed Calc 1. And so I was kind of torn between, okay, what was I good at in high school, going back to that fundamental issue. And so I was good at history and like sociology. I took a lot of civics history courses, and then I also wanted to tackle that hobby of mine of design. So I took half design courses, half criminology courses, um, before my second year at SFU. And although I like both, I decided to do my design courses in School of Interactive Arts and Technology. So that was kind of my realization that this is something I can take to work in tech, and that's kind of how I ended up.
Love that.
I can also share my story. Yeah, so tech was certainly not something I had on my mind at all. I actually ended up in computer science by accident because in like UBC science, you take general courses for your first year, and then you choose your top 3 courses. So computer science was my random third choice because I didn't know what to put down, and I had all of my eggs in the health sci basket because I wanted to be a doctor. So I actually cried when I found out that I got into computer science because I knew like absolutely nothing about it. Never took any computer science course. And I was fully intending on switching out to another major after 1 year. Like, I told myself I would give myself a year to try it out. And it was only until I attended NW Hacks, actually, like a hackathon, where I realized how cool this tech community is. And it really opened my eyes to like all the possibilities of tech and just how welcoming and cool it was. So that's what made me change my mind to go into computer science.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, I loved how for like every one of you, it was just like it wasn't a linear path into tech. So just love that we could you guys could share that today, because I feel like it's definitely something our audience can empathize with. So yeah, I guess we'll move on to our next question, which actually ties into one I had in mind for today, which was what tips do you have for co-op students, or I guess just students pursuing like an internship who are placed on a team of male-only or male-dominated coworkers? And along with that, if you have been in that situation or a similar situation, do you feel that you have had to work harder than your male colleagues in the pursuit of your goals? It is a pretty heavy one.
I could start off with saying I think I haven't had too many poor experiences during my co-ops, although like it is true that it's very likely that most of your teammates will be men or male. I'd say for tips, I would just stand up for myself if you feel like you're being treated a certain way just because you're female identifying. Yeah, but I also wouldn't recommend like changing who you are. I think it's also important to just be who you are and just stand up for yourself if possible. And you can always reach out to like your manager, or like depending on the circumstance, maybe you could also talk to the person if someone is like saying certain things that make you uncomfortable. If you can gauge it well, it's quite possible that you could tell them and they'll understand where you're coming from, because a lot of the times they're pretty unaware, I feel.
Yeah, there's this like first kind of natural instinct that if you're in a male dominated workplace that you want to kind of change yourself to like have more in common with the boys, or to engage in their interests just so that you can get along with them, besides talking about work stuff. But it is really important to stick to who you are, because sometimes that is kind of like a unique thing that can get you into better opportunities. And if you being female identifying has impacted you negatively in any way, there are resources now. It's much better, I would say, than like when I first started. Like how there's human resources, there are other departments that are more female dominated that you can rely on at the workplace, that can kind of act as your mentor, to help you out with some similar issues that you might be going through.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think for me, sometimes I'm like really shy and like non-confrontational. So like if I get spoken over or like ignored or interrupted, I'd be like, oh no, it's fine. Like I'm sure they didn't mean it. But actually, recently I was looking at Marissa, Design Team of One. I think she's here as a mentor. But I saw on her Instagram story, she was promoting this podcast episode. I think it was Invisible Women by 99% Invisible. And like, even though I'm generally like a peacemaker, like I don't want to make waves, listening to that and like realizing like how much we still have to go, like it made me want to advocate for myself, because I realized like it's not just me. Because if I don't speak up, then it's like every other woman who gets hired after me will probably have to face the same situation. So might as well like say something and then make the workplace a little bit better for everyone else who comes after.
The last thing I just want to add here is that most mid to large size companies will have employee resource groups that you can connect with. And so I would highly recommend seeking those out to find a community of people that identify similarly to you, and that you can also share experiences with, network with people there. And that's also just another great avenue to find mentors, friends, etc. So keep an eye out for those.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm actually just going to skip one question just for now and ask another that I think is kind of relevant to this. So what is one lesson that you did not expect to learn in the workplace?
Oh, I can go first because something immediately popped into my head. Actually, a lot of the challenges I faced in a workplace, I'm used to like a more remote workplace now, especially like during and after COVID. Something that I realized was like communication. People are always saying communication is super important. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm good at communicating. Like I can send clear emails with like bold headings and everything, with like the little action items at the end to make sure it's clear like what I want from people. But then I realized that like sometimes I don't ask questions when I need to, or like I assume things like at a meeting, like I don't raise a concern that I had. And then that led to like a lot of confusion and a lot of delays. So people always say to like over communicate. And I think that's something especially accurate that I've learned now, to like always say something. And then I'm always like giving updates to people now, always talking to other teams and saying like, this is what I'm doing. Because it's better than like not saying anything and then having a lot of people like wasting a lot of people's time because they didn't know what you were doing or what you were thinking.
My lesson is that a lot of people actually don't know what they're doing, like even though they've been at the company for 10s or 20s of years. I promise you that everyone has some sort of fake it till you make it attitude, and that is probably just the best attitude you can have in terms of feeling like you fit in. The most common example I can think of is like acronyms. People use acronyms all the time, and half the time people have no idea what it means, even as principals, principal, PMs, software engineers, stuff like that. So if you're confused, the chances are someone else is also probably confused. So just go ahead and ask that question or clarify whatever someone is talking about, because it'll usually benefit the rest of the room, not just you. So don't be intimidated talking to people that might have more experience, because again, everyone has some sort of knowledge gap that they're missing, and they just pretend like they know it. And then you fill it in somehow as soon as you realize that you're missing that gap.
Mine's actually kind of related to that one. Is I learned that no matter, you know, how young you are, no matter what your identity is, everyone's just waiting for someone to change something or call something out. Everyone is open to change as long as you bring it up first. I had this like preconceived notion that, you know, as like an intern or a co-op, that I had to just listen to whoever was there first or has been there the longest. But everyone's actually pretty much open-minded as long as you just bring it up like, hey, this thing might actually save us X number of dollars. Why haven't we tried it before? And no one will reject you. People will actually try to see if it's feasible. So yeah, not being afraid to bring up life-changing ideas to the company was something I didn't expect that I would learn.
Mine is kind of adding on top of that as well. I learned during work that like it's actually a tie between both Laura and Sophia's points, but like not everybody knows everything. You can't just assume like your manager or someone above you knows what you're doing. It's really valuable for you to become an expert in something yourself, or like there's lots of resources everywhere and you can learn things on your own and like bring in ideas to your team and like be the domain expert on that certain thing. It's super valuable, and it also like gives yourself more ownership, and it's also good for your own learning. I find that at work, there's actually a lot more learning than I expected. Like not just learning how to code or whatever, but you can actually try different things if possible, or like try to propose projects or different features and stuff, and like you can learn through all of those.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I feel like those were definitely very powerful words of wisdom, and it does tie into our next question, which is, have you experienced imposter syndrome as a woman in tech, and how did you handle it? I know you've all presented just some great strategies or things that you've already done that are related to this, but would just love to expand a little bit more.
Can I just say every single day? I am a new grad, so I've only been working for about 4 months, and it's pretty intimidating joining people on my team that have been here for 20 years, and having that contrast of being a new grad versus someone that's, you know, been here for so long, literally that they started their career before I was born, which is kind of terrifying to think about. So I would say kind of embrace it, right? Like if you feel imposter syndrome, then there's probably a reason behind it. Like you're new to a company, this is your first internship. Like all those layers enable you the opportunity to ask questions and use that as a crutch to say, hey, I don't know this, can you explain something to me? Or, hey, I need a little bit of help on this feature because I'm new to this language or something. I also heard a couple weeks ago that if you don't feel imposter syndrome, then you're in the wrong place. And I know that sounds kind of bad, but reframe it in the sense of, if you have imposter syndrome, then that means there's so much room and opportunity for you to grow, for you to learn, and for you to meet new people and gain insights from them. So even though imposter syndrome sucks, framing it in the right way can kind of help ease how you feel about it, and also enable you to kind of make the next move to lessen some of that imposter syndrome for you.
Yeah, speaking out definitely helps to, even your colleagues or your manager, they can help provide like a vibe check of whether your feelings of imposter syndrome is, you know, either something that's just going on in your head, or it's something that they can add to. Like a lot of workplaces have at least levels or places that you can compare to, like outcomes. Like you should, at junior level you should be able to complete this, and as long as you're going like at the right pace, completing those outcome levels, then your imposter syndrome might be something that is festering on. And don't be afraid to ask for help too. Like there are mental health resources. Like most companies have a really good benefits plan that includes like counseling and therapy, and like not being afraid to have like this network of people that you can rely on and speak out about what you're feeling.
Yeah, for me, what I do is I look up to other people like me who are kind of killing it in their own field. So like I mentioned design team of one, Marissa earlier, and it's like I just look up to those people because I think like if they can do it and then they're also facing imposter syndrome, even though I think they're so amazing, then like it gives me more confidence in myself and like I feel less alone.
For me, there's like I need to remind myself that there's actually a lot of value to being new and to not knowing things, because like you'll be going into this company with like pretty much a blank state and you're a sponge. You can absorb so much as a new person, and you can also like ask questions that maybe senior people would have never considered before because they think that they know the project inside out, but like they never saw it from a new person's perspective. There's also a lot of benefit to like just being fresh out of school. So you've learned all sorts of new concepts, new practices, new tech, like especially because tech moves so fast. Like people from like my older brother is 13 years older than me, and he was learning code in Cobalt or like C++ or something. And that's completely different from what I learned in school, right? So I think there is a lot of benefit that we just came out of school learning the newest technology and bringing that into the workplace.
Love that. Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk about just like mentors and networking, which I know has been slightly touched on earlier. So do any of you have any advice for finding a mentor and forming a meaningful connection with them? And along with that, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received from a mentor?
I think a lot of companies they have their own little mentorship, coffee date type matching systems. That's just based on the 3 places that I've worked at so far. So I think those are good resources. If you don't want to be like automatically matched, I do think reaching out to people in your company who you think are cool is always like, like you miss every shot that you don't make, right? So like there's a good chance that they'll be interested in doing mentorship with you or chatting with you, like even if it's just once. Like I think it's worth asking. I think the best piece of advice that I received from my mentor, he was telling me that you should be learning and doing work for yourself rather than for the company, because like it is for your own growth overall. I don't know if I'm explaining it nicely, but like basically just take tasks that you're interested in and do learning for your own benefit and for bringing to the team, because on the company level, like of course they love everybody doing their tasks, but it's up to the employees themselves to grab what they can take or to learn as much as they can to benefit them for their whole career.
Yeah, to add on to what Anita said about finding a mentor, like reaching out to people on LinkedIn works. I actually reached out to Sophia because I thought she was killing it and doing amazing. And she was super nice. Like people are way more willing to give you their time and like send you information than you think. Plus it was like easier because I could just send a message and I didn't have to like feel awkward in a Zoom meeting or anything like that. And then I also like using ADP list, which is for designers. I don't know if like computer science people have that. Hopefully you do, but that's been really helpful. And then the best advice I received was actually like relating to entrepreneurship rather than like design or like tech. And the mentor told me that he couldn't tell me what to do. And at the time I was really shocked because I was like, isn't that what you're there for? But then I realized that like I have to take things into my own hands sometimes. Like it's technically like my own project and my own life, and I need to find my own answers, because mentors can help guide you, but like what you want your life to be like is really up to you. So you just have to trust yourself and like test things out and learn from your own failures.
Yeah, there's two sides where how people found me as a mentor, and then there's also how I found mentors myself. So um, I actually met a lot of mentees through hackathons, NW Hack specifically, and like, you know, we come here to volunteer just for a weekend, but we're not just limited to that weekend. Like, feel free to ask for our contact information or our LinkedIn information, and like keep in touch, and feel free to send us random questions like, hey, you remember me from NW Hacks? Can we talk about like some career advice? And that was, you know, very refreshing, and I've engaged mentor-mentee relationships that way. As for me, there are a lot of like online communities these days, like, yeah, ADP lists I've heard of for designers. For product managers, there's Product BC. Like, there's these like associations that have Slack communities, networking sessions where you can meet other people in the field that have been in the field for years, and you know, you can see if there's, you know, a good match with someone, someone with this like the same kind of background or started out in the same place as you. That is like a sign of a good mentor. But one piece of advice that I vividly remember is actually a mentor that, you know, wasn't female. He was ex Microsoft guy who's you know, retired, and he was, you know, consulting at one of the companies I used to work at, and he saw kind of my ambition, and I would just take on things and work long hours, take on as many like high estimate tickets that I could, uh, like take on projects that weren't even related to design. And he told me that it would, if I take on too much, it would actually be my downfall. And learning how to say no and stick up for yourself sometimes is actually something that can, you know, save your sanity, your mental health, and your social life as well, because we can't just all work all the time. We have to have a good work-life balance. So that has always stuck out to me. And that was the best advice that I was ever given.
From a mentor perspective, the two things that I would say is, one, always send a message on your LinkedIn request. I ignore tons of LinkedIn requests because they don't have any message and I don't know how I know them. And so maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's their fault. A shared responsibility there. But I would definitely recommend at least writing something in your LinkedIn message request to indicate either why you're reaching out to me, how you know me, something like that, that can tie me to an event or a thing that I've done. Because otherwise, if I don't know you and you randomly add me, there's a very low chance that I will add you. And then the second thing is have a very clear idea of like what you're looking for in your head when you're reaching out to someone. I have gotten a lot of requests in the past, and I have mentored people, and I still am mentoring them, who just don't really have a clear idea of like what they're looking for from me as a mentor, which makes it really hard for me to actually give them good advice, have good conversations, because they're not prepared about what kinds of questions or what they're working on, what they want to know more about. And so that leads just like 30 minutes of awkward fill time a lot of the time, where, you know, we cut it off early or we don't really get in depth because, again, there's just not really a concrete background of what we are supposed to be talking about. And that also ties into, you can have different mentors for different specific things. So like I'm looking to find a mentor where I can solely talk about career planning and career goals. And that's going to be separate from someone that I want to mentor me in product design and product thinking, because people are probably going to have different strengths. So it's okay to have a lot of different mentors and for one very specific reason. And then that helps you focus what your conversation and the scope of the conversation will be. In terms of advice or the best mentor I've had, my best mentor would be my mentor from my internship. And it wasn't any specific piece of advice, I would say, but generally just having someone that actually genuinely believes in you and counteracts some of that negative thinking or imposter syndrome that you're having is just super, super helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's definitely very useful advice just on, the topic of mentorship and finding mentors, gaining mentors, and what it really means to have a mentor. So thank you all for your thoughts. Yeah, so I guess just being so that you've all had just such varied backgrounds and, paths to get to where you are today. What is your advice to those who want to get involved in tech but do not come from a technical background? What do you have wanted to know when you first made that transition?
Oh, I literally was just typing up a post for this because, like, I do marketing too, and I was like making a post on this exact topic because I myself, I graduated with a degree in psychology, and I also had all my co-ops and internships in marketing, so it didn't feel like very tech related. But I started learning UX design, and the most effective way I found was, I'll outline the steps, but like it's this. I found it to be most effective because like I'm somebody who can get things done, but like if it's a personal project, like something I'm learning on my own, I'll like procrastinate a lot and it'll never get done and I'll get unmotivated and stop doing it. So what I found helpful was like involving others. So like the first thing I did was follow the thought leaders on like Instagram, which is where I'm on the most. So whenever I'm just like scrolling through things, relaxing, I'm still learning. There's like a lot on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And then the second thing was to join communities. So like I joined Design Buddies and then like Vancouver Design Check-in. And like I just ask questions and people are super helpful. Like sometimes I go to the events and I learn so much from the people there. And it's like like you can ask them questions tailored to your specific situation as well. And then the third thing was actually to like learn the basics. So like going through resources online, like learning like how to even do design. I tried learning coding for a bit, but it was not for me. So like notice that learning basics is kind of near the end because if you're feeling unmotivated in like a Coursera course, then you can go back to the communities you joined and then like get motivation from them, like start a study group or something. And then the fourth thing is to join a team and like work on a project together because like sometimes if you just make fake projects on your portfolio, it's not as good as if you joined a real team and you worked on something real. So that would help you stand out. And also having other people to rely on you can kind of like force you to get things done. And then the last thing is find mentors who can like give you advice and help make things easier for you, which we already talked about.
Yeah, to add on top of that, I'd say like definitely get involved in the community or attend events such as like events like HackCamp, hackathons. That's where a lot of my like getting into tech kind of came from. I'd also say that if you want to learn, it's good to learn by doing, especially for coding related stuff, because it's easy to get really lost in those courses where it's like, oh, Python bootcamp, JavaScript bootcamp. And at the end of that, like you understand some stuff about the language, but you didn't really come out building anything. So it's not as satisfying. And like, even though you feel like you learned something, you feel like you didn't really apply it. So I'd say like the best piece of advice is to just try building something. There's so many Google tutorials and YouTube tutorials where it's like, I would like to build a calculator. I like to build a list with this language. And then it's easier to like start on that project and just Google and like learn your way to make that one project.
Yeah, it's really easy like the fact that, you know, tech is primarily computer based, like industry, all the resources are there. You can learn all the fundamentals, but the disconnect oftentimes is like the application of it. Like, can you provide proof that you know your fundamentals through projects? And yeah, there's already a lot of good advice that has been given. But then there's also challenges that I see often online. There's like 30-day UX challenge. There's a coding one where there's Leet Code and all those platforms that help you kind of build up your practice based off of a given like problem. How do you apply the language that you've just learned to solve that problem? And yeah, showing that you like making sure that you can write about your project is also a good thing for what if you're in a portfolio based job or applying for a portfolio based job like design or front end development, that you can discuss, you know, what was the feature or the problem at hand that you were going to solve, and all the solutions that you explored, why you went with a single solution. And I hate when portfolio case studies always end there. There's always like a leftover 10% that you didn't get to do or wasn't in the scope. Learning how to write about that is really makes or break a portfolio case study, and actually can make a difference for people who, you know, have a background in tech versus someone who doesn't. Like if you're in English or psychology or a major that comes from like a very essay based, writing based program, that can be kind of your edge.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think everyone else did a great job of hitting a lot of different points. I would probably go back to saying utilizing your network to find people who can advocate for you or believe in you will be really helpful. And they can also just be the kind of transitionary piece to help you move into more of a tech field.
Okay. Yeah, we just have a follow-up question on that. So is there any way that you all have utilized your unique backgrounds in your current role? And I believe an audience member is wondering especially about psychology, like her background and how that would fit into that role. So I guess, Jennifer, if you wanted to start on that.
Yeah, sure. When I first started learning UX design, it was like really easy because like UX research is like the same as psych studies. You have to like all the stats there is the same, the study process is all the same. So when I was reading about that, I was like, oh, this is all familiar material, so it was easy for me to learn. And same with like learning all the cognitive biases and things like that. It was stuff I already knew. So if you can spin it that way and be like, oh, my previous, like my existing knowledge is already helpful and I can apply it to anything, that would really help. Because like with psychology, I feel like you always have to work with people, so it'll always be relevant, and that's part of why I chose psychology as my major. But like one thing you learn in psychology is like the flaws in some study designs, like with the whole replication crisis and like people not using stats correctly. And I think that same thing kind of applies to UX design and tech as well. Like I read an article once, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about like following thought leaders and like following places you can learn from. So I was reading this article and it was like, oh yeah, there's a psych study that says the human mind can only remember like, I think it was like 7 plus or minus 2. And then you can only remember those number of items in your head. But then when you apply that study, it's like, well, the study was a different context than if you're like browsing a website. Like they were getting people to try to like remember, but like when you're browsing a website in real life, it's like you're not like trying super hard to remember. You're just like going about your day. You don't really care. So you would really rather stick with like 1 or 2 things instead of like 7. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that like while your background can come in handy, but it can also like don't be blinded by your background, and just like try to keep these things in mind and like always question what you know.
Yeah, for me, going into a people management role, going from, an individual contributor product manager, and then before that as like a individual contributor designer, and now that I'm managing both PMs and designers, uh, my degree had no business courses in it or anything regarding human resources or how to hire people. And I relied on one thing that both communications and CIET taught me, which is how to do interviews and how to do customer, like just discovery sessions. And knowing how to conduct user interviews is a very helpful skill if you're going into people management, where there'll be a lot of one-on-ones, there'll be a lot of talking to customers, interviewing people for jobs, and knowing how to like handle yourself in a room like that was one thing that I was able to extract and help me in my current role.
I came from a tech background, so like I didn't do psychology or anything, but I'd say just like the skills that I built from being in NW Plus also helped me with my current role. So like just being like an exec in a club taught me a lot about like documentation, running meetings, people management, just general communication, also like offering mentorship. I think that definitely applied to my current role now. Like I recently mentored an intern on my team, and we like do rotating scrum masters or meeting leaders. So I was able to use my skills for those.
I also don't have a super interesting background, also pretty standard coming from CS and going into big tech. So I will let what other people have said speak for themselves.
Awesome. Those were really great advice. Yeah, I guess just for our next question, how does one make their voice heard or just stand out simply in such a competitive and ever-changing industry?
Find your niche and stick with it. Or if you don't stick with it, find a role and stick with it. So obviously there are some very popular niches like security right now, which is growing, AI, ML, stuff like that. And the more depth you have in each field, the more you'll stand out and be more attractive, because compared to a generalist, you'll have more specific domain knowledge. And like other people have said, you'll work to become more of an expert in something. And overall, that will just be a great contributor in helping you stand out. The other thing that I've heard with respect to kind of like finding a new role or finding a new job is like, if you're switching jobs, stick in a particular niche, and if you're switching niches, stay in your job. So if you're moving from a PM role to a different PM role, or if you're moving from a PM role, try to stay in a PM role, but you can switch what niche you're in. So I can be a security PM now, but maybe down the line I can switch into being a ML machine learning PM. However, it would probably turn out really poorly if I wanted to switch from being a security PM now to being a ML data scientist. I can guarantee you I would not get hits on my resume for a long, long time. But I could switch from being an ML PM to being an ML, data scientist or engineer, because I already have that given domain background and knowledge. So onboarding and ramp up will take a lot less time. So I guess keep that in mind in terms of standing out. And when you're looking for your next role, the more specific you can get, the better and easier it'll be to kind of stand out.
Okay. Actually, I was thinking I'm a huge proponent of like jack of all trades. So I understand like the importance of like being a specialist, because I think they like you'd want a specialist, you'd want to hire one if it's for like an important project, because that person has the most knowledge, the most experience. But like for me, I'm always seeing these questions like, should designers learn to code? Like, should designers know business and like project management? Same with like developers. Like, should developers know how to design? Should developers know business? And I think it's really good. Like, it's never a bad thing to like want to learn more. You don't have to be super great at it. But I think like as a designer, knowing like HTML, CSS, it can help a lot on understanding the feasibility, like communicating with developers, getting better handoff, and then understanding business goals can also like help you stand out from other people. So like, you know, businesses are about the bottom line. So if you can show that you understand that and like can impact that, then like you're probably more likely to get hired. But to be honest, I think that perspective is because it's like a more junior role. Like if you're looking for junior roles, like knowing more things is probably better because you can stand out from all the other people. But if you have like 10 years of experience and then all the 10 years are like a bunch of different things, then it kind of is less of a positive than if you were just a junior starting out, I think.
Yeah, Jennifer is on the right lines. Like, as the more senior you are, the more of an expectation employers have is to you have know what you want to do and what you want to specialize in. I also want to add the variable of knowing it can be hard too, knowing this like right after graduating or if you're finding a co-op, what type of company that you want to work for, whether you want to do a small startup, mid-size, large company, also can depend on how you market yourself and stand out in the application process. Um, because startups, they're looking for more jack of all trades because they're cash strapped. They want people that can do almost everything, versus if you're applying for mid to large size companies, they want more dedicated specialized teams with specific subject matter experts in a particular domain. And so knowing a particular language, a particular framework might be more beneficial and might stand out more than if you were novice in all, master of none type scenario.
Wait, but that saying has a second part. It's, I think, jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than master of one.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait, Tori, can you quickly repeat the question?
Yeah, no worries. It was just about how does one make their voice heard or just stand out in such a competitive industry?
I'd say to be heard, it's good to just involve yourself as much as you can. Like it could be like within team stuff, team conversations. It could be just online when like communicating on Slack. Just like inputting more can always make you more heard, even if you don't think so yourself. I'd say to stand out. I think my thinking about that is a little bit different, or I feel that you should just, like for myself, I would just want to be myself and just pursue and learn things that I want to learn. So that could be like learning a bunch of different things and being really broad, or it could be going really deep into something I'm interested in. But I think that if, as long as I'm continually learning and developing myself, then like the opportunities that I'm interested like should be able to come to you. Yeah.
Can I add like an asterisk to what I said? I just wanted to add like, I guess the specific niches that I mentioned, security and AI or ML, kind of have higher barriers to entry because you're expected to know that knowledge beforehand, or at least have a good understanding of why you want to go into those fields. So I would say if you're looking at, again, at those more specific higher barrier to entries, the more domain specific knowledge you have prior will help you stand out compared to a generalist. But I do agree that at a student, a new grad level, it's really hard to get that depth.
But well said. Okay, so one of our final questions, which is, I think, great from the audience, which is great because it's, reflective. Do any of you have any regrets or anything that you wish you had known earlier? If there was anything you would do differently, I guess, this time around with your foresight or hindsight?
I have
I
one.
think,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Anita. Oh, okay.
Okay.
For me, if you were tuning in early on, I've always been allergic to numbers because of all my failures in physics and calc and math in general. So it would be knowing how to do those things better and working harder, getting better at math. Now that I'm in a business program where I have to take accounting and finance courses, and it's very important if you want to go into like management level, knowing how to balance a budget and all that. It's kind of like biting me in the butt that I've never really taken math seriously earlier, and you can never avoid it like throughout your adult life. So, especially in tech.
Okay. For me, this is more of a general university thing, but I regret not taking more courses that I was genuinely interested in, like regardless of if it's easy or hard. Just because I found that after you graduate and start working, it's pretty hard or it takes a lot of effort to learn like a course, like the depth level of a course worth of anything in a new topic. Uh, yeah, I think during my degree, I did end up spending quite like I did end up taking like bird courses or courses that are supposedly easy, and I didn't end up taking courses that I was actually interested in. Example being like I was actually interested in statistics, and I only took the one required statistics course in my degree. Also, I wish I was more involved in trying to do more projects or team projects. I could have joined some of those programming clubs at UBC that just work on building projects in a team. I think I was kind of lacking that. And it's also really hard to work on projects once you're working full time, because if you're spending 8 hours a day coding, like the last thing you want to do is do more coding after work.
Yeah, kind of related to that, I had always regretted not majoring in interactive arts and technology, which is like design at SFU, and I went with psychology instead. But then I recently realized that like it's not that bad because I majored in psychology, I was able to have time to get involved in all these different groups around campus, and they gave me a lot of like leadership skills, public speaking skills. I made a lot of new friends, and those are like experiences that you can't really get elsewhere. So that can help me stand out. And then some other things that I wish I had done was just like starting earlier because I'm kind of a perfectionist. Like I tried to, because in design you have to iterate pretty quickly, so they recommend you like have a really like just a sketch and then ask for feedback, and then that can save you a lot of time in the long run. So I tried applying that to my life, but then something I didn't do was actually like take action on the advice that other people gave me. I was like, oh, I'll just do it later and fix it up later. And then I never did. And now I kind of forgot what like the notes that I took were kind of random and I forgot what they meant. So I also heard that a lot of mentors are frustrated actually because all the advice that they're giving are not being implemented by their mentees because they're just there to like hear things, and then it's harder to implement that advice. So I just wish I was like follow through with the advice that I was given and actually get things done.
Things that I wish I knew earlier. One is write down all of your accomplishments and everything that you've done, kind of like a brag sheet. This will help you feel better about yourself when you think you haven't accomplished anything and you actually have. And write down all the small things, like you read this piece of documentation or you wrote this piece of documentation. That stuff matters. A lot of companies have you rate self-performance reviews. Like at Microsoft, we're really big on having biannual self-performance reviews, and you talk about that with your manager. And having a brag sheet makes writing something like that a lot easier because you can look back at what you wrote and say, okay, well, this is what I did, and here's the impact of what I did. And it also just helps you get less lost in the day-to-day of things. When you note like what you're doing in a week, you can actually look back and say, oh, wow, in a month I did a lot of things. And if you don't write that down, you forget a lot of the smaller details of what you've done. The second thing I wish I knew earlier is that it's hard. Like I cried a lot. I had a lot of tough times, and everyone to some extent feels that way and has felt that way. So I hope you know that if you are going through a tough time, or you're not getting your internship or co-op, or you're not getting your resume passed, or you're just receiving a lot of rejections, that's totally normal. I've gone through it. I've applied to hundreds of places and gotten rejected or ghosted from most of those places. So if you're struggling, don't worry. I've struggled too, and I am a strong believer in law of attraction, and that as long as you keep your positive attitude, mindset, even through the tough times, it'll get better, and you'll eventually find that one opportunity or that one door that opens for you and is really like that gem that you need to kickstart your career or kickstart your next opportunity.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you all so much. We just have one final question, which I think ties back into what you mentioned earlier, Laura, about the accomplishments. So is there any particular accomplishment that you all have had working in tech so far that you are most proud of? And what kind of mindset do you think was key to accomplishing that?
Yeah, I can go first. So actually, very recently, I'm super proud of myself for figuring out Webflow, which is like a no-code platform, and it's like HTML and CSS based, but it's also like click and drop. But then it was like so complicated. I didn't want to learn it for like the longest time, and then suddenly we had to, and I had to figure out all this like complicated grid system and like filters and like conditional visibility. And for somebody who is new to Webflow, I was like, oh my gosh. But I finished it and it worked, and I was just super proud of it. And I learned that like if I hadn't kind of just dreaded not learning Webflow, because I was always like, oh, I'll do this later, I'll do that later, then it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So I should have just jumped right in. So for a mindset, I should have just like not doubted myself so much and just like tried it. And it was actually super easy. And I do actually have to go run a user interview, but it was lovely to answer everyone's great questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. We'll see you next time. Okay. So yeah, again, the question was just about like, what do you think your biggest accomplishment working in tech so far is, and what do you think your mindset or any insights that you had that were central to achieving it?
This might sound kind of dumb, but just like getting my job. I, going into computer science, had this mindset of I have to be a software engineer, and that's kind of the only career path that there was. Partially because people in my family, they were software engineers, and I didn't really know too much about the tech field and the tech industry and the different kinds of jobs there were. I would definitely recommend doing your research and learning about what being a dev is like, what being a PM is like, and what being a designer or a marketing manager, stuff like that. There's tons of intersections with tech. But long story short, I had my internship last summer with Microsoft. They had no new grad PM spots, and so I interviewed for a new grad software engineer spot. I got rejected, cried a lot. It was probably like the worst day of my life because I thought like my life is over. I didn't get a software engineering or a return offer from where I intern, and Microsoft kind of is known for having a higher return intern rate compared to some of the other more competitive tech companies, and that was pretty devastating. But I ended up getting help from my previous manager and the recruiter to schedule just a general new grad interview for Microsoft at large, again, just like a regular new grad candidate, and I ended up passing. So yeah, I don't know. Again, it sounds kind of silly and dumb, but I think mindset-wise was really just keeping my chin up, and again, knowing that eventually down the road, the right thing is going to come to me. I failed so many software engineering interviews. I won't even lie. Like I failed Disney. I tried Amazon. I didn't pass. Got rejected from Microsoft, stuff like that. So I would just say like everyone's journey has a lot of failure and rejection hidden somewhere inside of it, even if that's not what they're showcasing. So don't measure everyone else's success to what your current journey or what your current experience looks like.
Mine's kind of the inverse of that, being on the other side of the table. I see my accomplishment is seeing other people's accomplishment, especially those that I've either hired as a co-op before, and it's like being the person to either give them their return offer or promote them or give them their raise has always been like my greatest accomplishment as a manager. Seeing that, you know, I've contributed to their growth as a developer, a designer, etc. And even if like eventually they leave the company that we were working at together for a much like higher earning or higher level role, always gives me such great pride and accomplishment. I would say more than the stuff that, you know, I've personally accomplished, because that means that this industry is growing slowly and surely.
Yeah, so I have two things, I guess. I just also wanted to tag along Laura's point with like I was really proud that I got the job that I got, because I also went through the really stressful interview process. I think I interviewed at least 200 companies between September to February in my like last year of university, and it was only until February where I got 3 offers. Like it was absolutely nothing, and then 3 offers like in the same week. So it like those 6 or 7 months of just interviewing and getting rejected was like really, really hard to get through, and it just felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. My advice for that is to just keep pulling through. The best experience or practice for interviews is just doing interviews. So like there's no loss to doing and failing interviews. My other accomplishment would be from my first co-op. I did a co-op, like my very first co-op was a DevOps co-op, which is a pretty different field from software engineering or software developing. And I was just really proud that I did my DevOps co-op project, just because I felt like I knew absolutely nothing about DevOps going into this job. And then I came out of the like 8-month co-op with a whole project relating to DevOps. I think the mindset that I had was like, I'm just going to learn this, even though this is not really the job that I thought I would be in or what I would sign up for. Just like went and did it. And then I came out with a project. I was like, wow, I can't believe I did it.
Yeah, those are all incredible accomplishments. Thank you all so much for just your honesty and words of wisdom today. So that wraps up our panel. So for all our attendees, we do have the stamp system going on where you can collect stamps for attending today. So the password for that is Command F, and I believe we should be sending out that banner or stamp spot right about now. And yeah, so again, the password is Command F. But yeah, I just wanted to say like just a huge thank you to all our incredible panelists today. It really means the world to have you all here and to have you all answer these questions. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for our audience for listening in and asking such great questions as well. So yeah, we will be wrapping up just now. So yeah, thank you guys so much, everyone. Means the world. Okay, bye.